Coming up on this Wednesday edition of Newsline at Noon, with North Korea repeatedly test-firing upgraded missiles, military authorities in Seoul warn the regime has around 100 short-range ballistic missiles capable of hitting key facilities in South Korea and Japan. Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se will discuss wartime sex slavery by Japan at a UN Human Rights Council meeting later this Wednesday as part of Seoul's campaign to pressure Tokyo to stop denying its wartime atrocities. Plus, global financial markets breathe a sigh of relief after Russian President Vladimir Putin rules out any immediate military action against Ukraine, but the US and its allies are piling the pressure on the Kremlin to withdraw troops from Crimea. These stories and more on Newsline at Noon.
Thanks for joining us. You're watching Newsline at Noon. I'm Ju in Seoul.
Very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broom. We begin with the latest on North Korea's binge of missile firings. On Tuesday, Pyongyang launched several projectiles into the East Sea in another sign of its apparent protest against the ongoing South Korea-U.S. joint military drills.
Yes, we now connect live to our Kim Hyun-bin at Seoul's Defense Ministry for the latest. Hyun-bin, why is North Korea doing these test firings now? It seemed as though inter-Korean relations were improving recently.
Well, it appears North Korea is disgruntled over Seoul and Washington's joint annual military exercise, which is ongoing as we speak. Pyongyang blasted Washington on Tuesday for deploying a nuclear-powered submarine to South Korea's southernmost port city of Busan as part of the drills. The regime is highly opposed to these exercises in general and usually launches provocations of some sort or hits out with harsh rhetoric against the South and the U.S. South Korea's Defense Ministry spokesperson Kim Hyun-bin labeled Tuesday's launches as explicit acts of aggression against the ongoing joint South Korea-U.S. military drills, adding that Seoul is keeping a close watch on the possibility of additional provocations to come.
So, Hyun-bin, how much of a threat to South Korea are North Korea's multiple rocket launchers and heavy artillery?
Well, it poses a very serious and real threat. North Korea's artillery power is ranked third in the world, right behind Russia and China. The regime's rocket launchers are often mounted on trucks, so they can be mobilized and moved quickly, making them harder to track. According to military sources in South Korea on Wednesday, the North has around 100 of these short-range KN-02 ballistic missiles. These missiles can load up to 400 kilograms of explosives and chemical weapons, while launching dozens of missiles in minutes. The KN-02 has a maximum range of 170 kilometers and can hit a target at that distance in less than 4 minutes, posing a huge threat to the Seoul metropolitan area. It is thought 30 KN-02 missiles are mounted on mobile launch pads and have Seoul in their crosshairs. North Korea has recently developed multiple rocket launchers as well, called the KN-09, which is presumed to have a target distance of 200 kilometers, which means that when shot from the border, it could reach Gaeryongdae, where joint military bases of South Korea's Army, Air Force, and Navy headquarters are located.
And Hyun-bin, how is the international community, especially the United States, reacting to the recent provocations?
Well, the Pentagon said Tuesday in its latest strategy document that North Korea poses a growing threat to the United States because of its pursuit of long-range missiles and nuclear weapons development. It's described the regime as closed and authoritarian. The Defense Department said the U.S. military will keep up its investment in missile defense while maintaining a major presence in the region.
Okay, Hyun-bin, thanks very much for your report there. That was our Kim Hyun-bin reporting from the Defense Ministry in Seoul.
Meanwhile, Seoul's Unification Ministry sent a written proposal to Pyongyang this Wednesday morning, suggesting the two Koreas hold talks to arrange regular reunions for families separated by the Korean War. Deputy spokesperson Park Soo-jin said the ministry proposed holding a round of working-level Red Cross talks next Wednesday on the South Korean side of Panmunjom, the inter-Korean security zone that is located at the de facto border between the two Koreas. The move follows President Park Geun-hye's recent call for regular family reunions during a speech at a ceremony commemorating Korea's Independence Movement Day on March 1st. The last round of reunions was held 2 weeks ago for the first time in 3 years. South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se will address the UN Human Rights Council later today to raise the issue of the so-called comfort women, or women forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. Seoul's foreign ministry said Minister Yoon will give a speech in Geneva and call on Japan to compensate the victims of its wartime sexual slavery. This is the first time since 2006 that Seoul's top diplomat will attend a UN Human Rights Council session. The comfort woman issue has strained relations between Korea and Japan as high-profile Japanese politicians have continued to deny the wartime atrocities committed during its imperialist past. The United States has called on Korea and Japan to work towards easing tensions, emphasizing that the conflict should not become a threat to the stability in Northeast Asia. The call comes as historical disputes have hit another rough patch in recent days. Our UDN has the details.
Washington's top diplomat for East Asia has called on Korea and Japan to improve ties in response to concerns about the deteriorating relations between its allies in Northeast Asia. Speaking at a congressional hearing on Tuesday, Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia Daniel Russell said there is an urgent need to show prudence and restraint in dealing with difficult historical issues, and added that the issues must be handled in a way that promotes healing. He went on to emphasize that strategic cooperation between the U.S., Japan, and Korea is essential for the future security of Northeast Asia, especially in the face of nuclear threats from North Korea and other regional threats, an apparent reference to concerns surrounding a more assertive China. Russell's comments come amid Tokyo's continued denials of its past wrongdoing. About 500 nationalists, including high-level politicians, held a rally in Tokyo earlier this week, calling for a revision of a 1993 apology for the Japanese military's program of sexual slavery during World War II. Senior Vice Minister of Education Yoshitaka Sakurada charged that all historical facts with regard to Japan's program of sexual slavery have been fabricated. This has prompted Korea's foreign ministry to fire back that history and the surviving victims show who is actually lying about the truth. Yurian, Arirang News.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broom and Uchin Ju.
Russia has successfully test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile. A test which the U.S. says it was well aware of in advance adds an extra element to the ongoing tension over Ukraine. Park Ji-won has more.
Amid the tentative situation in Ukraine, Russia's defense ministry confirmed late Tuesday that it had test-fired an intercontinental ballistic missile earlier in the day. The ministry says the RS-12M Topol missile, launched from near the Caspian Sea, successfully landed its target in a remote area of Kazakhstan. The test was planned before the current crisis in Ukraine, and the U.S. was notified before the test. However, it adds to the undercurrent of tension between Ukraine and Russia. In a press conference with reporters Tuesday, Russian President Vladimir Putin said what happened in Kiev was unconstitutional overthrow, and his country has the right to use all means to protect its nationals under the current Ukrainian government, which he says is illegitimate.
If we see lawlessness starting in the eastern regions too, if people ask us for help, and we have already an official address from the current legitimate president, we reserve the right to use all options at our disposal to protect those citizens.
However, he stressed the use of military force would be the last resort in dealing with the crisis.
What can be a reason to use the armed forces? This is, of course, the last resort. Simply the last resort.
He added he had no reason to purposely harm Russia's brotherly neighboring country. Putin called the leaders of the U.S. and other Western powers hypocritical in their condemnations, specifically mentioning the United States' interventions in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, where he said Washington either acted without UN backing or completely distorted the content of UN resolutions. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry was in Kiev Tuesday in an effort to ease the crisis in Ukraine. He urged Moscow to stop threatening Ukraine and offered the new Ukrainian government financial aid. Kwon So-ah has the details.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry arrived in Kiev Tuesday with an aim to build a relationship with the country's new leadership and show Ukrainian citizens his support. He also accused Russia of an act of aggression in Crimea, but said he is not looking for a confrontation.
In the streets today, I didn't see anybody who feels threatened, except for the potential of an invasion by Russia. So I would hope that President Putin, who, you know, who is insisting against all evidence everywhere in the world about troops being in Crimea, that they're not there, that he will step back and listen carefully, that we would like to see this de-escalated.
In Washington, President Barack Obama dismissed Russia's President Vladimir Putin's justifications for the military forces on standby and said they were a pretext to invade further in Ukraine. Back in Kiev, Kerry offered an economic and technical loan package worth $1 billion to assist Ukraine's new government. The package requires congressional approval for implementation. The United States also plans to send technical advisors to Ukraine to get the country's economy back on track. John Kerry's visit to Ukraine did not last long, and afterward he flew to Paris for a meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the first between the two since the unrest in Ukraine erupted. Russia had declined an invitation for a meeting between Ukrainian and Russian officials at the same venue. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
World markets rebounded Tuesday as fears over the Ukraine-Russia standoff eased slightly and investors felt more confident Moscow was backing away from military confrontation. U.S. stocks rallied, recovering by more than the hefty losses they saw on Monday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average spiked 1.4%, its biggest jump this year, while the S&P 500 ended at a record high. Major European markets also rebounded, with London's FTSE gaining more than it shed on Monday. Germany's DAX and the CAC 40 in France both closed almost 2.5% higher, and Russia's main market recouped more than half of the 11% it lost on the first trading day of the week.
Korea's foreign exchange reserves hit its record high in February, making it the 8th record-breaking month on the bounce. The nation's central bank said Wednesday that the figure peaked at above $350 billion as of the end of last month, up $3.4 billion from January. The Bank of Korea attributes the increase to the weak U.S. dollar that pushed up the value of non-dollar assets and a rise in investment profits. Korea has the 7th largest foreign reserves in the world. Now, some more positive numbers on the economic front. Korea's shipbuilding industry solidified a smooth start to the year, logging the most global orders in February for the second consecutive month. UK-based Clarkson Research Service said Wednesday that Korean shipbuilders won orders accounting for nearly 1.4 million compensated gross tons last month, up 20% from the same month last year. With that, Korean shipbuilders now control roughly 45% of the global market. The pickup is attributed to Korean shipbuilding companies winning more contracts for larger, more expensive ships, such as container vessels and LNG-fueled ships. In line with President Park Geun-hye's 3-year economic innovation plan, the government has unveiled the ways it plans to boost investments in research and development. As our Shin Se-min tells us, the investment is aimed at supporting small and mid-sized companies and setting up an environment for the so-called creative economy.
To give Korea's research and development sector a much-needed boost, the government will be pouring more money into related institutes over the coming months. The Ministry of Science, ICT, and Future Planning laid out its plan Tuesday to provide 68.7 billion won, or over $64 million this year. The money will mainly go toward establishing an R&D-based station for small and medium-sized enterprises in 4 different Korean cities. The science districts will foster business research laboratories, improve exclusive research zones, and promote networking among researchers. More than $54 million will be funneled into businesses that commercialize research outcomes, and the rest will go towards establishing a better environment for startups. The Ministry of Trade, Industry, and Energy also laid out its own plan on Tuesday, promising to invest over $140 million in the nation's smart sensor industry over the next 6 years. The government will use a major chunk of that investment in generic technology development. Along with wearable smart devices and autonomous vehicles, which represent just 2 of 13 industrial projects, the government is looking to create more sensor-related products for the international market. The global smart sensor industry is booming. But here in Korea, the market is led by smaller companies, and they haven't been able to compete effectively on the world stage. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, this next story won't come as too big of a surprise for people living here in the Korean capital, but a new study shows Seoul is among the world's top 20 most expensive cities in the world. The London-based Economist Intelligence Unit's annual worldwide cost of living survey found Seoul to be the 17th most expensive city to live in out of the 131 cities it surveyed. The survey was based on the average price of various goods and services, from food to public transportation fees and to private school tuition. The most expensive city to live in is Singapore, followed by Paris and Oslo. Mumbai was ranked the world's cheapest city. Korea's household savings grew at their slowest pace in 6 years in 2013. The Bank of Korea said on Wednesday that the amount of household deposits at banks came to roughly $470 billion as of the end of last year, up 6.6% from the previous year. Of that, the amount of savings deposits stood at around $430 billion. That's up around 5.5% from a year earlier, and that's the slowest pace in 6 years. Demand deposits, which can be withdrawn at any time, grew at their fastest pace in 12 years, jumping 20% in the same period to roughly $40 billion. Household credit came in at $955 billion at the end of the year, up 6% from 2012. Koreans who were raised or even born and raised in a country outside of Korea are commonly referred to as gyopos here in Korea, and the number of them that are returning to make a life for themselves in their homeland is increasing by the year. In fact, recent data shows gyopos now make up nearly 15% of all foreigners in Korea. Connie Lee has more.
Bien Ho Jian, or Pyongyang as she's known here in Korea, is receiving her scholarship to study in Korea. She's a Korean Chinese who came from China just 7 months ago.
I'll be studying law at Seoul University.
The scholarship, given by the Overseas Korea Foundation to dozens of foreign nationals of Korean descent, not only gave Bien a chance to come to Korea for the first time in her life, it also gave her better opportunities to study in her field of choice.
I found that there are more advanced and developed courses in the area of law that I wanted to study here in Korea than in China.
And she's not the only one making the move to the motherland. According to recent data from the Ministry of Justice, the number of foreign nationals of Korean ethnicity surpassed the 200,000 mark for the first time last year. That's a 24% increase from the year before.
The record number comes from the increasing number of Korean Chinese citizens coming to Korea. In 2008, immigration laws were amended to give Korean Chinese citizens living here similar benefits to Korean citizens, including being allowed to own property and have health insurance.
In 2013, more than 67% were Korean Chinese. The second and third largest group were the Korean Americans, making up 19%, and the Korean Canadians, who made up nearly 6%. And for the most part, many come to Korea for the jobs.
There's definitely greater interest among overseas Koreans to live in Korea because Korea has become globalized with many new employment opportunities.
And taking advantage of opportunities is what one Korean American is doing. 31-year-old Kenny Park uses American influences and Korean ethnic background to start a Mexican fusion restaurant in Seoul.
Growing up in California, we just have a really vast array of food that's available to us. But when that Korean taco truck trend started to really boom, I kind of woke up one day and was like, hey, why don't we introduce this Korean taco trend in Korea as opposed to, doing it in America.
The popular restaurant has grown, expanding to 3 locations in the span of 2 years.
I think Korea it's such an underrated place to do business and to live as an expat or as a gyeokpo. And I think the opportunities are really abundant here.
Connie Lee, Arirang News.
Good afternoon, I'm Eunice Kim, and here are your headlines from around the world. The 12th National People's Congress launched this morning in Beijing, China, and ahead of it, Premier Li Keqiang in a report announced that China will keep its economic growth target at 7.5% this year, the same as last year. The economic growth target is in line with Beijing's plans to guide the world's second largest economy to more sustainable growth. Li also said its national defense spending will be expanded by 12.2% to $131 billion. The annual full session of the Congress will run for 9 days, during which corruption, pollution, and regional issues are also expected to be addressed. Turning now to Egypt, Armed Forces Chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has given his clearest indication yet that he will run for president. State news agency MENA reports the popular military man told an audience at a Cairo graduation ceremony that he could not turn his back on calls by the majority of Egyptians for him to run for president, and that official procedures will follow soon. In July last year, al-Sisi deposed Egypt's first democratically elected leader, Mohamed Morsi. Egypt has been caught in a bloody political struggle since then. And over in the United States, President Barack Obama has submitted a budget blueprint for the 2015 fiscal year that features a focus on fighting poverty. He proposed boosting tax credits and job training programs for U.S. workers, as well as increasing spending on infrastructure and expanding early childhood education. The proposal marks a shift away from last year's emphasis on deficit cutting. It faces strong resistance from Republicans who prefer a reduced government role in promoting economic opportunity. And Syria has drafted a plan that would remove all of its remaining chemical weapons out of the country. According to the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, Damascus would miss the original deadline to completely get rid of the weapons by April, but that there had been good progress. About a third of Syria's toxic arsenal will have been removed by the end of this week. The global chemical arms watchdog said the rest is on course to be shipped out by the revised deadline of June.
Good afternoon. Well, the last cold snap is here. In Korea, we call it 꽃샘추위, which literally means the cold weather is jealous of the flowers. So it brings a chill to the air, and it surely did. Also, it will snow in parts of Gangwon-do, where it's been snowing in Gangwon-do, and it's expected to receive of up to 20 centimeters and 1 to 5 centimeters in Gyeongsang-bukdo. So a heavy snow advisor has been issued for these areas. But snow should all let us Korea by the late afternoon, while the rest of the country can expect to see a sunny skies, but there will be some strong gusty winds blowing into the country, so it will make it quite cold this afternoon. So let's bundle up tight today. And it will get colder over the next 2 days, and it looks like these chilly temperatures will stick around till the end of the work week, but the cold snap will ease by the weekend. So please do keep that in mind, and here are the readings for today. The afternoon high in Seoul will only get up to 5, Daegu will rise to 11, while Gwangju and Busan should top out at 8 and 12 respectively. Now let's see how other regions are looking. It looks like Jeju and Daejeon will climb up to 7, while the top temperature on Mount Keungang will be 1 degrees Celsius. Well, that's all for me today, and stay warm, everyone.
And those are the stories we're following at this hour.
Join us again for more updates on the day's headlines on our next newscast at 2 p.m. Korea time.
And Jinju and I will be back again at the same time tomorrow. Until then, goodbye.